Hey guys, this is Andrew Manautou, and today I'll be presenting to you guys Jonathan Goforth. Jonathan Goforth was probably one of the most successful Protestant missionaries to China in the early 20th century. Um, and when I found out about that, the fact that he was so successful in China, and the fact that he came from Toronto, Canada, raised by a farmer, really poor upbringing, but really poor rural upbringing, I wanted to know what makes someone like that so successful in a country like China? Like, what makes someone so successful in cross cultural ministry like that? Was it the fact that Goforth had some kind of special skill or talent that allowed him to succeed ministering there, or was it just simple plain faith and obedience? And after studying Goforth's life and ministry, he and his wife Rosalind's life and ministry, I realized it was simple plain faith and obedience. Um, their ministry. I don't have time to share the earlier details of his life, but suffice to say, his ministry began in China in 1888. That is when he and his wife arrived to Changde, China. Changde is one of the southernmost regions of China, below the Yangtze River, and their ministry was successful, don't get me wrong, but the ministry was not easy. Within their first year, they lost everything in a house fire except their Bible and their money. Um, in the first about 20 years or so of their ministry, I think they lost 5 children to diseases, major tragedy. And the house fire was not the first time they would lose everything across the time of their ministry. It was very hard. It was very hard and was certainly not easy. Um, but they spent the first half of their ministry in Changde as local missionaries. And the home that they built there was actually one of the most effective evangelism tools that they had because their home had a chimney and a cellar. And the Chinese people found that fascinating. They wanted to know more about these people, and they just wanted to see the house because they'd never seen anything like that kind of architecture in their region. So the Goforths, they would essentially host people. They would have house tours, but they would say, "I'll let you see the house, but you got to hear the gospel." And they saved thousands. They reached thousands of people doing that. It was genuinely insane because students and like other officials, they would have to travel to that region when they would see the house. They would want to explore. So they worked as local missionaries in Changde for about 15 to 20 years, I believe. And then no, actually, it was about 15 years they were there, and then they faced the Boxer Rebellion. The Boxer Rebellion was a massive political unrest period in China. It was very anti-foreigner, and of course, the Goforths were foreigners. And because of the Boxer Rebellion, it was just no longer safe for missionaries to be in China. Unfortunately for the Goforths, as they were traveling out of the country, they got attacked on the road by people who were supporting the Boxer Rebellion, and Goforth was nearly murdered in the streets in front of his family. It was very scary, very horrifying, and the injuries ended up lasting his whole life. Um, but that didn't stop them. They returned again about a year and a half later, and they went up to Manchuria because they had already felt very confident in the ministry. They started in Changde. They move up to Manchuria, but before going to Manchuria, Jonathan Goforth gets invited to Korea to see the revivalism happening there. There were massive revivals, and despite revivalism and Pentecostalism being something very new to Jonathan Goforth as a Presbyterian Canadian minister, he embraced it because he was like, this is clearly working with them. I believe this is going to work for the Chinese people. And lo and behold, it did. Like, the best way I can describe it is, if this is like the curve of salvations that were happening with the Goforths in Changde, this is what happened like when they started implementing revivalism. It was incredibly effective. It defied all expectations because the revivals were very emotional, loud outpouring and confessions of sin. Like, that's just something that you would not expect from the Chinese culture that are very big on your reputation and saving face. But it shows that there's sometimes a difference between real life and theory. It defied theory about missions work in China. Um, and that just goes to like this, the fact that Jonathan Goforth was willing to adapt and embrace Pentecostalism, the fact that he was creative enough to use his house as an evangelism tool, it shows that if If there was a skill that Jonathan Goforth had, it was maybe creativity, but I think creativity is something that we all have a little bit of in us. But more than creativity, I think the thing that made Jonathan and Rosalind Goforth so successful was their simple faith and obedience. There was lots of hardship. They lost everything multiple times in their time in China, but they kept evangelizing, they kept serving the Lord, and they stayed right up until the near end of their lives when Rosalind had a health crisis and Jonathan ended up starting to go blind. And yeah, in about 5 minutes, that is Jonathan Goforth.